Welcome back to another fly tying episode here on Cooper Landing Fishing Guide. We're going to tie a tube egg sucking leech. Real easy to tie, not very many materials. In the vise I've got a Pro Sport Fisher tying needle there for your tube flies, and Pro Sport Fisher Flexi Tube. This is the large size, the 40-40 size. So you're going to have part of the tube is going to be thinner, part that's going to be a little bit thicker. For us, this thicker part, we're going to use that as a kind of a hook guide. So we'll tie most of our fly in this forward section. We'll start off with some red uni thread here in 6/0. We'll get a nice thread base going here. And we'll tie all the way to that junction between the thicker and thinner tube, and we'll tie right up against that. We'll get a dubbing loop here going. And we're going to have a little hot section or a butt section here. It's going to be some fluorescent red Angora goat. And we'll just get a little pinch of this, enough to be a little bit of a prop, but also give it a little bit of color on the back end here. A little pinch of that. Put that in our dubbing loop, get it nice and thinly spread out on this dubbing loop. And a little pinch and spin. And we'll pick this out with our dubbing brush. And once we've got it fairly well picked out and thinned out, we'll pull the fibers back and wrap right up against that junction of those two tubes and kind of in touching turns. And the cool thing with Angora, you don't need a whole lot of it. You'll actually end up using a lot less than you think you need. We'll tie off that dubbing loop. And then we'll pick that out a little bit. Next material, we're going to use some black Extra Select craft fur. Get a little bit of a wing in the back end here. And you'll want a little bit thicker chunk of this than you think to start, because the base of this fur can have a lot of under fur. And so we'll get a decent little chunk there. And we'll cut that off. Cut it pretty close to that fake pelt. And the under fur can be pretty thick, so we'll pinch about halfway down, pull out some of that under fur, and then we'll pull some of the long tips, and then we'll just even it up nicely and pull out a little bit more under fur and even these pieces up. So we'll want our craft fur tail to be a little bit longer than the longest portion of that tube. We'll end up cutting that tube off, but or shortening that tube, but we'll use it as a guide. We'll spin our thread here, which will help our first wrap over our craft fur. A couple quick wraps, and then we'll splay that with our thumbnail, just kind of spread it out a little bit on top, and then we'll secure those butt ends in. That'll make a nice little overwing there. Our next material will be some black fun fur. So this isn't a specific fly tying material, but it's a craft material. You can buy it on eBay, all different colors. It's fairly thin, ties in not that easily, but you'll get the hang of it. There's a lot of it, so you don't have to worry about wasting a whole lot of it. It's like polar chenille, but it's much thinner and has a little bit more movement like a marabou. And we'll go ahead and make sure we pull this back as we wrap, and this will be all touching turns. And we'll cover, a little over an inch or an inch of that body. This will sort of be an intruder style fly where you have a rear station and then a fairly long, sparse body, and then a front station. And every so often, every couple wraps, even, I'll be pulling this back, but I'll also let go of most of this fun fur. I'll just kind of grip it near where I'm tying in and just kind of let go, and that'll untwist it as you go. So you get a lot more fibers that'll come out. If you don't do that, these fibers will just twist up alongside of that, the cord or the core of this fun fur. So it'll actually end up, just kind of not giving you as many of these, basic hackles as you wrap. So just something to do or think about while you're wrapping this in. And we'll go a few more turns. You can always make this fly longer or shorter for your particular fish and fishing conditions. But this will be basically an egg-sucking leech. It's going to have, the leech body, and it's going to have, kind of a red head eventually. Pretty sparse, very easy to cast. And we'll go ahead and pick some of this out. The fun fur tends to get trapped a little bit, so it's nice to pick it out. So our next material will be some black spay blood quill marabou from Fish Hunter. And we'll get our tie-in point here. And you can leave in this tip after you've tied it in, or you could cut it off. I don't mind leaving the tips in. Like I've said in previous videos, these are, fishing flies, so I'm not terribly concerned with the overall, look. It's more about the performance. I like really sparsely tied flies that are fairly quick and easy to tie. And we'll go about 3 wraps of this marabou. Want to make sure you got enough kind of head, but then not a terrible amount. You don't want to make your fly too bulky. So this will be our 3rd wrap here. And we might go a little bit more. And we'll tie that off. And we're almost done with this fly. We'll pick some of this marabou out of here. And you can see that's going to be a great fly, really buggy fly. It's going to have a lot of awesome movement. We'll get a little tie-in spot here for our last material. For our last material, we're going to use some Leech Red rabbit zonkers, and we'll just cut off a little, maybe inch and a half of this fur, and we'll add it to a dubbing loop here. So I'm gonna cut off just a little bit over an inch. It'll create a nice little spot up front, a little color variation. You could go a little bit more bold with your red. I kind of like this Leech Red because it has some black properties to it. Make our dubbing loop here. And I've got a short video, I'll link it in the description here. Kind of just talks about the way I like to tie in rabbit fur into dubbing loops. There's a lot of different ways to do it. This just happens to be the way that I like to do it. So we'll get that rabbit fur in the loop, and then with a couple quick long cuts, we'll cut off that fur, and then you can spread this rabbit down the dubbing loop. And you can also lengthen or shorten, the length of that fur. You can kind of push on the butts or pull on the tips. We'll go ahead and pinch and spin, and then we can use our tips of the scissors to keep stuff from getting trapped in there. So I'll just put that tips there in between and just kind of pull stuff as it gets trapped. And now that we've got that spun in there nicely, we'll go ahead and pick it out, and we'll wrap and touching turns. This will be, make for a great head. It'll help push a little bit of water and just makes a nice finish to your fly. Nice clean finish. And we'll tie off that dubbing loop there. We'll cut off our loop, and then for whip finishing you can either add a little dab of super glue, or in this case I'll just hand whip finish. Hand whip finishing is a little bit easier with these kind of long tubes, or you could use an extended whip finisher. I'll do 2 whip finishes, and then your favorite cement of choice. Get that all tidied up. And now when it comes to trimming your tube, we're going to start off with our butt end here, and we're going to leave, roughly a 1/2 inch of that tube, and we'll take a straight razor blade, and then we'll get some nice, nice cutoff point here, and just some straight down, even pressure. You can just cut that off there, and that'll leave, like I said, about a 1/2 inch of that tube, and that'll, when you put your hook, your leader through the front of the tube and your hook at the end, you can nest your hook into that tube. And now for this tip, we're just going to leave a little tiny chunk of plastic at the tip. Same thing, we'll find our cutoff point. You don't want to use scissors because that will actually end up crushing your tube, so you want to just use a straight razor blade and cut straight down. And now you'll see we got a little bit of tube left. And what you'll do here is take a lighter, and kids, just make sure you have your parents' permission for this. Don't burn down your house. We'll take our lighter and use the blue part of the flame to just barely touch that tip of the tube there. And once that curls over nicely, it's going to leave a nice opening in the tube for your leader to slide through. You'll definitely want to allow that to cool. Give it a nice brushing here. And that's going to be a very easy to tie, very castable egg sucking leech. Thanks for watching.